You know what the difference is between you and someone sleeping under a bridge tonight? It's not intelligence. It's not work ethic. It's not even luck. According to Mike Yankowski, a college kid who had everything, the difference is about 72 hours and one bad week. He proved it by walking away from his comfortable life and living on the streets for 5 months. No safety net. No hidden credit card. Just him, the concrete, and a question that would break him. What if the homeless aren't who we think they are? And if you're watching this because you want your assumptions shattered and your perspective completely rewired, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Because what you're about to hear isn't a heartwarming story about helping the poor. It's something far more unsettling. Mike Yankowski wasn't struggling. He was a student at a well-regarded Christian college in San Diego, surrounded by friends who discussed theology and service over expensive coffee. His biggest problem was probably finding parking on campus. He had dreams, plans, a future that looked like every other American success story waiting to unfold. But Mike had a problem that privilege couldn't fix. He couldn't stop thinking about the people everyone else had learned to ignore. You see them too. On your way to work, outside the grocery store, holding cardboard signs at intersections. And you've learned the same skill everyone learns in a city. How to look without seeing. How to keep walking. How to convince yourself that their situation is complicated, that giving money might enable addiction, that there are systems in place to help people who really want it. Mike told himself the same things. Until the day he couldn't anymore. It started with a simple observation that lodged in his brain like a splinter. He noticed how easily people at his college, including himself, could talk about compassion, about Jesus washing the feet of lepers and eating with tax collectors, while simultaneously crossing the street to avoid a homeless person asking for change. The contradiction was so glaring, so obvious, that once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. His faith talked endlessly about loving the marginalized. His life did everything possible to avoid them. So Mike made a decision that everyone around him thought was insane. He would become homeless. Not for a day, not for a weekend. For months. He would live on the streets of multiple cities with his friend Sam, experiencing hunger, cold, rejection, and danger. No backup plan. No camera crew following them for a documentary. Just 2 college kids stepping into a world that most people spend their entire lives trying to escape. The first night was in Denver. Mike and Sam found an alley, laid out their sleeping bags on concrete that held the day's heat for maybe an hour before turning ice cold, and tried to sleep. Mike lay there, every sound amplified, every shadow a potential threat, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd been homeless for exactly 4 hours, and he was already terrified. Not of starvation. Not even of violence, though that fear would come later. He was terrified of being invisible. Because that's what happened almost immediately. The moment Mike started looking like he lived on the streets, people stopped seeing him. The same people who might have held a door for him yesterday now stepped over him. Mothers pulled their children closer. Business owners asked him to move. He had become something less than human in their eyes. And he could feel it in every interaction, every avoided glance. Every moment he was treated like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be known. The hunger came faster than he expected. Not the "I skipped lunch" hunger that you fix with a drive-through meal. Real hunger. The kind that becomes the only thing you think about. That transforms your entire day into a desperate search for calories. Mike and Sam learned which dumpsters behind which restaurants might have edible food. They learned that most of what gets thrown away is still good, just unwanted. They learned that eating from garbage changes something in you. Adds a layer of shame that sits heavy in your chest even when your stomach is finally full. But what really broke Mike wasn't the hunger. It was the cold. In Portland, temperatures dropped, and he learned that being cold isn't just uncomfortable. It's consuming. It's a relentless assault that makes sleep impossible. That turns your body against you as you shiver so violently your muscles ache. He and Sam would huddle together for warmth, desperate and miserable, as rain soaked through their inadequate blankets. Mike had been camping before. He'd spent nights in the wilderness. This wasn't that. This was trying to survive in a world designed for people with houses, with heat, with the basic dignity of a door that locks. The shelters were supposed to help. That's what everyone assumes, right? If you're homeless, just go to a shelter. But Mike discovered that shelters come with their own violence. He watched men get beaten for taking someone's spot. He saw drugs traded openly. He learned that many homeless people choose the streets over shelters because at least on the streets, you can run. In a shelter, you're trapped with desperate people in a confined space, and desperation makes people dangerous. Mike met a man named Rick who'd been a contractor. Had a business, a house, a family. Then his wife got cancer. The medical bills destroyed them. She died. He lost the house. Started drinking. Lost everything else. Within 2 years, Rick went from running his own company to sleeping behind a liquor store. His story wasn't unique. Mike heard dozens like it. The veteran with PTSD. The teenager kicked out for being gay. The woman fleeing domestic violence. The man with schizophrenia who fell through every crack in the mental health system. These weren't lazy people. They weren't stupid. They were broken people in a system that doesn't fix broken things, it just hides them. Mike realized that the difference between him and Rick wasn't character. It was catastrophe. Rick had one fewer safety net. One more bad thing happened. And the fall from house to homeless wasn't a slow decline. It was terrifyingly fast. The shame was constant. Mike felt it every time he asked for money, every time someone dropped coins in his cup without looking at his face, every time he had to beg for something as basic as food. He was experiencing a life that millions live permanently, and it was destroying him psychologically. He started to understand why homeless people often struggle with mental health. It's not that mental illness makes you homeless, though it can. It's that homelessness makes you mentally ill. The chronic stress, the lack of sleep, the constant rejection, the absence of any privacy or safety. It breaks your mind. In San Francisco, Mike had what he describes as his breaking point. He was sitting on a street corner, hungry and cold, watching people walk by. Well-dressed people with shopping bags and coffee drinks and lives that looked perfect from where he sat. And he felt something shift inside him. A bitterness. An anger. These people who had so much and gave so little. Who stepped over him like he was garbage. Who probably went to churches and synagogues and talked about compassion, but couldn't spare eye contact for a suffering human being. Then an older woman stopped. She didn't throw money in his cup. She sat down next to him. Asked his name. Asked his story. Listened. Really listened. When she left, she gave him $20, but that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that she'd seen him. She treated him like a human being worthy of conversation, of time, of dignity. Mike broke down crying after she left. He'd been homeless for 3 months, and this was the first time someone had treated him like he mattered. That interaction changed everything. Mike realized that what homeless people need more than money, more than food, more than even shelter, is to be seen, to be recognized as human. The dehumanization was worse than the hunger. The invisibility was worse than the cold. People can survive incredible physical hardship. What destroys them is being treated as if they don't exist. Mike also confronted his own hypocrisy. Before this experiment, he'd been one of those Christians who talked about loving the poor but kept a safe distance from actual poor people. He'd made assumptions. He'd believed, on some level, that people were homeless because of bad choices, because they didn't work hard enough, because they were addicts or lazy or flawed in some fundamental way. Living their life revealed how utterly wrong he'd been. Most homeless people were working. Most were trying desperately to get out. Most had stories that would break your heart if you bothered to listen. When Mike finally went home after 5 months, he was physically destroyed. He'd lost significant weight. He was sick. Exhausted. But the physical damage would heal. The psychological transformation was permanent. He couldn't go back to the comfortable ignorance he'd lived in before. He couldn't walk past a homeless person without seeing a complete human being with a story and a history and a soul. The experiment had succeeded in the worst possible way. It hadn't just shown him what homelessness was like. It had made him incapable of not caring. Mike wrote a book about his experience called Under the Overpass. He spent years speaking about homelessness, about compassion, about the distance between what we say we believe and how we actually live. But here's what haunts me about his story. Mike could leave. After 5 months of hell, he could shower, put on clean clothes, return to his college, and resume his life. Everyone he met on the streets is still there. Rick is probably still there. That teenager is still there. The woman fleeing violence is still there. And we've built a society that's incredibly good at making homelessness invisible to those who don't experience it. We design benches with dividers so people can't sleep on them. We play classical music in subway stations to drive homeless people away. We pass laws against panhandling and camping. We don't solve homelessness. We just move it somewhere we don't have to see it. Out of sight, out of mind. Out of our comfortable, carefully constructed lives. Mike's experiment revealed something most of us don't want to face. We're all much closer to homelessness than we think. Most Americans are one major illness, one job loss, one disaster away from serious financial crisis. The safety nets we assume exist are full of holes. And the people who fall through those holes are just like us. They're not fundamentally different. They're not more flawed or lazy or broken. They're just people who had one fewer chance, one less supportive family, one more catastrophic event. What separates you from someone sleeping outside tonight might be nothing more than luck and timing. That's a terrifying thought. It's much more comfortable to believe that homelessness happens to other people, different people, people who made bad choices. Because if you believe that, you can keep walking. You can keep ignoring. You can keep living your life without the weight of their suffering on your conscience. But Mike couldn't do that anymore. And if you've watched this far, maybe you can't either. Maybe you're starting to see the people you've been trained to ignore. Maybe you're realizing that every person holding a cardboard sign has a name, a history, a series of events that led them to that corner. Maybe you're understanding that the line between housed and homeless isn't a wall. It's a thread, and it's thinner than you think. Mike's story isn't about a hero who saved the homeless. It's about a privileged kid who discovered that the people we discard are people. That homelessness isn't a character flaw. That compassion requires more than good intentions. It requires action, proximity, discomfort. It requires seeing people we've been taught to ignore and recognizing ourselves in their faces. The question Mike asked himself was simple. What if everything I believed about homeless people was wrong? He spent 5 months finding out. The answer destroyed his assumptions and rebuilt his entire worldview. He learned that the greatest poverty isn't lack of money. It's lack of human connection. It's being treated as invisible. It's having no one who knows your name or cares if you live or die. So here's the question for you. What would you discover if you actually stopped and talked to the person you walk past every day? What would happen if you looked them in the eye, learned their name, heard their story? You don't have to live on the streets for 5 months to show basic human decency. You just have to be willing to see. Because the uncomfortable truth is this. We're all connected. Your comfort exists alongside their suffering. Your warmth exists while they freeze. Your full stomach exists while they dig through trash. And pretending you don't see them doesn't make them disappear. It just makes you complicit in a system that treats human beings as problems instead of people. Mike Yankowski learned that the hard way. He can't unsee what he saw. He can't unknow what he learned. And if you've made it to the end of this video, maybe you can't either. The people sleeping rough tonight are still out there. Still cold. Still hungry. Still invisible to most of the world. The question is whether they're still invisible to you.